Hey everybody! So this video will be for chapters 9 and 10, and then I'll do another one for 11 and 12, and then we're done the book. So like buckle up, because 9 and 10, if you've read it, is pretty whack. Okay, so chapter 9 starts on page 160, so again, very consistent with like setting description right off the bat. I mean, we've seen this in almost like every chapter. And so we've learned that what maybe happened to Simon is probably more of like a seizure or some type of fit, right? And that's what it says. So with the running of blood, Simon's fit passed into the weariness of sleep. So it made him like pop a blood vessel in his nose. And then it describes in detail how like the flies are preferring the Pighead instead of like Simon's blood because of like the oozing like fat and spilled guts and blah. So great description there. Like the Lord of the Flies hung on his stick like a black ball. And then on the top of page 161, Simon, again, is still determined to, like, find the beastie or figure out the truth because he says, what else is there to do? I'ma do it. So he walked with a sort of glum determination like an old man, like good simile there for his character. And he's persistent is basically what that whole page is saying. And then he finally realizes like what it is, right? So he realizes it's like a dead guy like stuck on like a parachute and the wind kind of blowing it around, like this dead body swaying. So on the top of page 162, like the tangle of lines showed him the mechanics of this parody. He examined the white nasal bones, the teeth, the colors of corruption. He saw how piteously the layers of rubber and canvas held together the poor body that should be rotting away. And it makes him throw up, right? It's such a like appalling sight. So he's sick till his stomach was empty. But he realizes it's not a beastie or not anything, right? It's just probably from war. This guy crashed or whatever. And so it's nothing to be like concerned about. So he feels responsible to like tell the truth to the boys. And he sees that they're like pretty much all at the camp. And it says like the beast was harmless and horrible. And the news must reach the others as soon as possible. So he feels like, I know the truth, so I better go tell them because it's nothing to be concerned about. It is terrible, but it's nothing to worry. And then on top of page 163, like Ralph and Piggy are like in the bathing pool and splashing around. And we do see some character development for Piggy slightly, right? Ralph's kind of splashing at him. And instead of like retiring meekly as usual and in pained silence, he instead says like, stop it, do you hear? Like, leave me alone. So he actually stands up for himself and he splashes him back and he's like, okay, relax. But it is developing, right? Like instead of surrendering, he's actually standing up for himself. And so again, they're kind of wishing they could be home. And Ralph's kind of frustrated. He's like, I don't even care anymore. And it describes too like that mob mentality on the bottom of 163, right? Pretending to be a tribe, putting on war paint, right? So they're very like savage now with their attire. And 164 just describes like this big feast setting, okay? And they're all yelling and dancing around and laughing and eating. And it's kind of awkward and tense, like when Ralph and Piggy show up. But then on the top of page 165, they bumped Piggy, who was burnt, and yelled and danced. Immediately, Ralph and the crowd of boys were united and relieved by a storm of laughter. Piggy once more was the center of social desertion, so that everyone felt cheerful and normal. So he breaks that uneasy tension, right? They're all like kind of awkward, but then again, having Piggy to like make fun of, they're like, ah ha ha, this is great. We're all friends here because they have someone to like laugh at. And then Jack is like, take them some meat, and he has his spear and he's acting all chiefly. And so they each get a succulent chunk, which I just love that description right here. And then they see a storm coming, right? And so this storm is very much a weather motif. Okay, so like a storm, like what would that symbolize and how's that going to reflect like what's happening in the story? If you've read it, you know. That was an attempt at a wink. I just closed my eye. Anyway, So Jack is like, has everyone eaten all that they want? Da 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 da. And the pride of ownership. So he feels like, I've given them this meat. I am the greatest ever. And, sorry. Right here, 165, he looked down from behind his paint at Ralph and Piggy. So again, that mob mentality, the face paint, it's like a layer of protection, and like you're more confident about who you are. You feel like people can't like see your truth. And again, the threat of violence like in his voice, and he's saying like, give me a drink. Like he's very demanding as a leader, and everyone kind of caters to him. Like Henry brought him a shell and he drank, watching Piggy and Ralph over the jagged rim. Power lay in the brown swell of his forearms. Authority sat on his shoulder and chattered in his ear like an ape. That's such a beautiful character. And that's the very bottom for Jack. Just describing how the power is seen in his body. And like is like talking to him, influencing him. And so now on page 166, he's like trying to redeem himself. Like, who's gonna join my tribe? Because remember, he was like tearful when he got rejected last time. And Ralph is still saying, I'm chief, right? We keep the fire going, and now you just run after food. And then Jack calls him out like, you ran after food, boy. You're here eating what I've caught. And then Ralph blushes like he's like embarrassed. Okay, but he says like, I said you were hunters. That was your job. But Jack just ignores him. And again, he's like, who's gonna join my tribe and have fun? So remember, I kept saying about like fun and play, like they're not taking this situation seriously. And so, and Ralph is still saying, I'm chief. What about the fire? And I've got the conch. So the conch is still being brought up, even near the end of the book. Okay, so make sure you're putting this in that chart. And this argument they're having, Jack is like sneering, like, the conch doesn't count on this part of the island. And Ralph's like, no, it does. It counts here. It counts everywhere, right? And he's still trying to reiterate, like, we need fire. We need to be rescued. And Piggy's kind of like warning Ralph, like, we should go. Like, he senses that it's going to be trouble. So again, almost like that maturity. Like, he can tell there's tension in the room, or like that there's going to be something bad happen, which there is. Okay, so again, talking about the storm, and then Ralph calls him out, like, you didn't even make shelters. What are you going to do now? And he's kind of like, ugh, I never thought about that. I just wanted to stab a defenseless sow to death. And again, their weather motif, right? But then he says, dance, everybody dance. And that's that mob mentality. Everyone's dancing and chanting. And Roger's like miming the terror of the pig, and they're all like hunting him. And a great line for like theme on the bottom of page 167, like Piggy and Ralph, under the threat of the sky, found themselves eager to take a place in this demented but partly secure society. So that need and desire to be a part of something, to like, even though it's very flawed, to be part of a society, to be part of a structure and not be part of chaos. So they join these boys just to feel that they're not alone and that they're a part of this. And so they're doing the chant, kill the beast, cut its throat, spill its blood. And I love the next line there. The movement became regular while the chant lost its first superficial excitement and began to beat like a steady pulse. So that it's like a pulse, right? Continuing. And so that again is like that mob mentality. Like they all are one heartbeat beating together and all doing the same actions like a pulse. That's just like beautiful. There was the throb and stamp of a single organism. Again, a beautiful quote for mob mentality. They're all beating together. They're one single organism. They do all one action together at the same time. And so they're chanting. And then a thing crawls out of the forest. This is the bottom of page 168. Brace yourself. This dark thing, this uncertainty, and the beast stumbled into the horseshoe. It's the beast. And so they're chanting, and then Simon was crying out about something about a dead man on a hill. So they hear Simon saying like, hey, the beast is not real. It's just this dead guy stuck in a parachute. But then the beast that's on its knees at the center, its arms folded over its face, it was crying against the abominable noise, something about a body on the hill. So they've mistaken poor little Simon for the beast, and they are killing him. This is crazy. Savage. And again, it's that mob mentality though, right? They think it's the beast. They're all together. They're all like, oh my gosh, we have to get rid of it. Ah! And they're chanting. Like at once, the crowd surged after it, poured down the rock, leapt onto the beast, screamed, struck, bit, tore. There were no words and no movements, but the tearing of teeth and claws. Ah! And then the rain comes down like a waterfall, right? Washing it away. So even in the rain, they could see how small a beast it was, and it already its blood was staining the sand. So they like stab Simon to death, and like the rain comes down, and it's almost like a break in their like from their reality of like, and their intensity chanting, and the rain comes down, they're like, and the blood's washing away, like very intense. And again, on the bottom of page 169, like the beast lay huddled on the pale beach, and the stains spread inch by inch. So he's bleeding to death, laying there. It's sad. And so along the shoreward edge of the shallows, the advancing clearness was full of a strange moonbeam-bodied creatures with fiery eyes. So all the boys are like, have this intensity. And then the body lifted a fraction of an inch from the sand, and a bubble of air escaped from the mouth with a wet plop. Then it turned gently in the water. Simon's dead body moved out towards the open sea. So I kind of just read like certain lines I had underlined on the last page of the chapter there. But it's looking at like what killed Simon. Like, was it fear? Was it the mob mentality? And probably a bit of both, right? But they were so invested in that chant and in that one heartbeat, one being, and that they, as soon as one started, they all just kind of did it, right? And that happens. We see that as a consistent theme in so many different things. So Simon, R.I.P. So that's like the second death, right? The boy with like the mark on his face, and now Simon, who is just trying to help, right? Okay, chapter 10 is the shell and the glasses. Okay, and so we're going to see in this chapter too that loss of innocence and like realizing the truth of what they've done. So Piggy and Ralph are together, and like Piggy is kind of realizing that he can't like see well even with his glasses now, or like he can kind of see without his glasses, but he can never. It says Ralph remained unmistakably Ralph. Like he is so in tune with Ralph that like he always can pick him out. So just showing like how he is so invested into Ralph. And they're like recalling like where they used to sit, like the coarse grass was still worn away where the assembly used to sit. The fragile white conch still gleamed by the polished seat. So we're seeing like the conch is still being mentioned and how it's described, right? It's fragile. It's gleaming. So it's still an item of importance, especially to Ralph and Piggy. Okay, and then Ralph is saying like, Simon. And Piggy said nothing but nodded solemnly. So they're aware of what they've done, right? You can tell that by how the author's describing what they say. And then like, what are we going to do? And Piggy's like, the conch. He nods toward it. And Ralph's like laughing like, he's like, you're still chief. He's still trying to encourage him. He's like, oh, I got the conch. And he's like, Ralph, stop laughing like that. Like, what are the others going to think? And then he says, like, that was Simon. You said that before. Piggy, huh? That was murder. Okay, so he has lost his innocence as a child on 172. He's realized, like, we all just murdered Simon. Like, that was messed up. And Piggy's like, stop it. What are you doing talking like that? Like, he doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't want to acknowledge it. He wants to live in this, like, ignorance is bliss. And he's trying to make excuses, right? It was dark. There was that bloody dance. There was lightning and thunder and rain. We were scared. So he's trying to make reasons why they acted the way they did. I wasn't scared, said Ralph slowly. I don't know what I was. So again, he can't even really recognize like why he was a part of it. And it probably that mob mentality, right? He was just doing what everyone else was doing and didn't realize. And he's upset, right? Like he's like, don't you understand, Piggy? The things we did, he may still be. And they're like, no. Perhaps he was only pretending. Like, they're like, maybe he's still alive. Maybe he was just kidding. And Ralph's like, no, we really messed him up. Like, he's dead. Because Piggy, why? I cannot speak today. Piggy's voice tailed off at the sight of Ralph's face. Like, they're trying to like deny involvement, but Ralph knows the truth and is aware of like what they've done. And they're saying, well, you were outside the circle. You never really came in. Didn't you see what they did? There was loathing, but at the same time, a kind of feverish excitement in his voice. Didn't you see, Piggy? Not that well. I only got one eye now. You ought to know that, Ralph. So again, they're kind of trying like to deny their involvement. Like, well, we were on the outside of this like murderous circle, so like didn't really see. And then, it was an accident, said Piggy suddenly. That's what it was, an accident. It was dark. He had no business crawling out of the dark like that. Like, we didn't know. It was an accident. And then Ralph is saying, like, you didn't see what they did. Like, he saw. You can tell this is, like, traumatizing. This is going to change him forever. Watching this boy, that was his friend, be stabbed to death. And Piggy's trying to convince him, like, forget about it. It's not going to do you any good thinking about it. And then he says, I'm frightened of us. And that is exactly what the Lord of the Flies, like Pighead said, like, I am all of you, right? The pig is reflecting like the evil that's inside of us all and like the devilish nature that lives in all of us. So he says, like, I'm afraid of us, of what we could all be capable of what we could do. He's probably shocked that he participated in this. And he didn't realize the power that this like mob mentality has. And he says, God, I want to go home. And Piggy's trying to reiterate, like, it was an accident. That's all it was. And he kind of touches Ralph and he shudders. Like, he is traumatized. Like, if you're shuddering at human contact, at being touched, like, you're traumatized. Okay? And he's like, we were all there, all of us. Like, we all participated in this. And then he kind of, like, he's like, well, I was on the outside too. Like, denying again. And Piggy's like nodding eagerly. That's right. We were on the outside. We never did anything. We didn't see nothing. Right? So Piggy's being very like, I don't know, officer. I wasn't there. I couldn't tell you. I didn't see. I was on the outside of the circle. And then they're saying like, we're going to live on our own. So they really don't want to be a part of like Jack or anything to do with it. They have like Sam and Eric and Piggy and Ralph and like some little ones and that's it. And so the twins come in and there's kind of like this awkward tension, right? Like, after the feast, said Sam in a stifled voice. Eric nodded. Yes, after the feast. We left early because we were tired. Like, there's this awkward tension because they know what they've done. Like, they're aware of the fact they just committed murder, right? The air was heavy with unspoken knowledge. So this is all on page 175. So they're aware of what's taken place. They're not innocent in this. And so they go back up to where like Jack is and Roger is like loving this new authority he has. He's like, stop, halt, the chief. I have to challenge everybody that comes up here. Like, I'll beat you if you try. So Roger, as we know throughout this book, has been very like trigger happy and kind of like demented and like wanting to like kill and hurt innocent things. And so, some foreshadowing on the top of page 176, there's this weapon that Jack's created that you, like, wedge a rock and it flies off the cliff. And so, they're like, what a proper chief we have, da-da-da-da. And so he's going to take us hunting. And then we learn that they've tied up one boy, Wilfred. And that they're saying, yeah, Jack's going to beat him. He's been tied up waiting for hours. So, like, you see how evil and cruel Jack is, which we knew would kind of happen, from how he's been described throughout the whole book. But he literally has a kid, like, tied up, waiting to, like, beat him for whatever reason. So, near the bottom of page 176 there, like, Roger received this news as an illumination. He ceased to work at his tooth and sat still, assimilating the possibilities of irresponsible authority. Then, without a word, he climbed down the back of the rocks toward the cave and the rest of the tribe. And the chief is sitting there naked to the waist, his face blocked out in white and red. So Jack's sitting there naked, so very, like, savage, has his face painted. And the newly beaten and untied Wilfred was sniffing noisily in the background. So he's crying, like, and he's untied now, but he just has gotten the crap beat out of him by Jack. So we see what type of leadership that Jack has. And how, like, that human nature, like, he is the boss now. He has no one to be responsible to. Ralph's not interfering. And so this is how he treats people. And so on page 177, too, it says, like, a savage raised his hand and the chief turned a bleak, painted face towards him. So they're, like, being described as savage now, like by the author. Like that's who they are. They're no longer schoolboys. They're no longer innocent. They are savages. And so it's like, why would they try to sneak in? And so we see that Jack is like a paranoid leader too. Like he's fearful that like, oh, they're going to spoil things. Like he's worried about Ralph. He's not totally confident in his position. And then he's trying to convince all the kids that it was the beast that crawled in. Like it wasn't Simon that they murdered. They're like, oh, the beast disguises itself. And it was the beast. Like we weren't aware. It came disguised. And they're kind of asking like, well, wasn't it Simon? Like trying to say it. And he like shuts them down. And they're kind of telling themselves that like, oh yeah, it did disguise itself, because they're trying to ease their own like discomfort of the truth of what's happened. And then they ask like, well, how are we going to have a fire? And Jack is embarrassed because he doesn't know, but his blush, it says on page 178, the chief's blush was hidden by the white and red clay. So again, that like mask is a tool to like hide his emotions or like makes him feel like stronger. And that adds to that like mob mentality. And so he's kind of just waving any objections aside, the chief, like, come on, we'll do our dance again. And like, we'll have our own like tribe. And they're kind of making a plan to kind of like steal the fire from the other boys. And yeah, the other boys make a fire, and it's kind of like now not so much as like a smoke signal, but like as a means of comfort for them. And then Ralph, bottom of page 179, Ralph remembered the ungainly figure on the parachute. He said something about a dead man, so he would be Simon. He flushed painfully at this admission that he had been present at the dance. So he's like admitting himself that like he heard Simon say that and he was a part of it. So he's like, oh, like that self-realization, like I did this, right? And then Piggy, of course, is complaining about his asthma with the smoke, and they're all like, sucks to your asthma, or Piggy, we don't care. Got bigger fish to fry. We literally just murdered a kid. And so they're kind of like, what's the good about making the fire? I'm tired. No one's going to see a smoke signal in the dark anyway. And like Piggy stands up for Ralph again on page 180, right? Like, Ralph's told you often enough, said Piggy moodily. How else are we going to be rescued? And like, there's no good for wishing for radios and boats. Like, we need to be rescued. And then again on the bottom of page 180, like anyone can play at hunting. Anyone can get us meat. So again, it's like a game, not serious life. Okay, and they're saying it was easier to keep the fire going when it was up there. So like before the split where they had it. And then Ralph stood up feeling curiously defenseless with the darkness pressing in. And he's like, fine, let it go out for the night. Whatever, we'll light it again in the morning. Just feeling defeated overall and traumatized. So that's on 181. And like 182, Ralph just really wants to go home, right? He settles in for a night of supposing, like thinking about how things used to be. His mind skated to a consideration of a tame town where savagery could not set foot. So again, he wants like a structured society. He wants rules. He wants like what happened to Simon to not happen. He doesn't like living in this savage land. So he's like dreaming of like a regular town that's tamed, right? And savagery could not set foot. I really like that part. And so they're saying like if they don't get rescued on page 183, those are all like kind of words for just becoming basically crazy lunatics, right? Round the bend, bomb happy, crackers. Like, we're all going to go barmy. We're all going to go insane if we don't get rescued. And we're all going to turn savage like the other boys. Okay, and then on 184, they hear something and they realize that it's like the other boys coming to steal their fire. But they first think it's the beast, right? So on page 184, like Ralph prayed that the beast would prefer the little ones. So he's like, please eat the small children. Don't get me. So that shows that he still has a belief, though, that the beast is real, even after everything that's happened. And then Piggy starts to believe, too. He's like, it's come, gasped Piggy. It's real. And so we've realized, though, that the truth is that the beastie has come because it's the other boys. And the truth is like their evil intentions have come. So the devil has come, like the Lord of the Flies, the beastie, whatever you want to call it. Like that Piggy's like, oh my God, it is real. Because it is metaphorically real. It is the boys coming to like harm them. And so page 184, top of page 185, they're all fighting, right? Ralph gets kneed in the tender area of a man and they're fighting. And then they leave, and their like faces are all slippery with blood. And then he kind of calls out in a quavering voice, so he's like upset. But he's like, little ones, go to sleep. We had a fight with the other ones, but don't worry about it. And that was Jack and his hunter, said Ralph bitterly. Why can't they leave us alone? And what would they come for? Why do they want to fight us? And then Eric's like, I got one of them so good, I need him right in the pills, right? Which was Ralph. So they were fighting each other, but they couldn't tell because it was dark. And then they're like, I thought they wanted the conch. And so it's still a point of interest. Like, I thought they were coming to steal that. So it still has some power if they're believing that the boys would be coming to steal that. And then how it's described, right? The conch still glimmered by the chief's seat. They didn't take the conch. I know, they didn't come for the conch. They came for something else. Ralph, what am I going to do? And so then we learn, like it ends the chapter with Jack. The chief led them, trotting steadily, exalting his achievement. He was a chief now in truth, and he made stabbing motions with his spear. From his left hand dangled Piggy's broken glasses. So instead of just stealing fire, he sold the means to create fire and took Piggy's glasses. So now Piggy won't be able to see, but Jack's proud of himself because he's created this achievement. Okay, so a lot of really exciting and crazy stuff happens in those chapters. And look, 26 minutes. Go me. All right, so 11 and 12 video will come this week as well, and then we're done this book, and then I'll be posting the essay topics so you guys can start planning. You have a lot of time to work on it, and make sure if you want to have a Google Meet to like review your essay or want me to proofread it, make sure you ask me of that, okay? It's no problem, but you got to ask or else I don't know you need help, right? And please make sure you're adding to that like summative document as well for this novel, but that's all stuff. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Okay, so I hope you guys have a great day. See you later.